Welcome to another edition of the Digital DJ Tips podcast. This is an inside track edition, and that means that with our live student audience as ever, we'll be talking today about three burning issues in the world of DJing. We're going to talk about OneLibrary, the potential of one DJ library for all software and hardware that's been dangled this week with the launch of something called OneLibrary. We'll talk about the new developments in headphone and speaker technology over the last year or two that promise to make producing music in your headphones more believable and easier, and to make any speakers in any room sound better. And asking, do you really need this stuff? And finally, we're going to look at a big change in DJ streaming, which is getting music that you don't own into your DJ sets easily and with lots of features that DJs would need for this technology to take off in the DJ world, as it's taken off, of course, with Spotify and Apple Music and so on in the real world. So, as I mentioned, this is recorded in front of an audience of our students. We're the biggest DJ school in the world, and we're also completely funded by those students. So there's no shonky business going on in the background here. This podcast is 100% supported by its students, and there are no adverts. So welcome to the first of our three topics today, and it's a big one because this week in DJing there has been an announcement that could, and we say this sometimes with our tongue in our cheek, but really it could change everything. And that is that the biggest name in DJing, the biggest name in DJ equipment, and the biggest name in DJ software, AlphaTheta, formerly Pioneer DJ, although they don't like us saying formerly Pioneer DJ, even though it's true, AlphaTheta have launched something called OneLibrary. Now, if I say OneLibrary, what do you think? You probably think, wow, one place to keep my music and keep all my DJ stuff, and any software can use it. How awesome would that be? So hold your horses, because although what they've launched is cool and could just be really a big change that changes everything eventually, as I was saying, it's not OneLibrary. But it is quite exciting. So let's first cover what it is, and then cover what you can do with it. And then we'll talk about whether this might lead to what I described, OneLibrary, where any DJ software can look at your music and your cues and your loops and your beat grids and your playlists and just instantly read it and work with it and so on. So what they've launched is called OneLibrary, but it's really one import and export for your library. So that means that you can use your DJ software, whether you're using their own software, which is called Rekordbox, which works with all the Pioneer DJ and AlphaTheta equipment, whether you're using that, or you're using at launch Algorithm's DJ software, or imminently Tractor, which is another reasonably big name in this game. If you're using any of those, you can plug a USB drive into your laptop and do the same thing that you can do with the software that comes from this company, which is click export, and it will put the playlist or even your whole collection that you've chosen onto that drive. Now you can go and plug it into any of the most modern pro DJ gear, again, made by that company, and it'll just work, right? So you don't need to take your laptop if you're a Tractor user or a DJ user into the DJ booth and plug it in to use the gear that you would expect to find in a DJ booth, because you can just stick it on a USB drive now and work that way. So that's pretty cool. You can also take your playlist or a couple of playlists or all your collection from one of those platforms, put it onto a USB, plug it into another platform and import that playlist and that music to the other one. So there's a bit of interchangeability, a bit of import and export. And that's what they've launched. So you might say, what about everyone else? What about Serato and Virtual DJ and the other platforms like Engine DJ? Well, they're not on board now. Virtual DJ actually hacked this years ago. They said, oh, you know what, we're just going to make this a feature of our software. But they're not officially on board now, and the other ones haven't announced anything. We would expect that with a fair wind, most of the industry, if not all of it, will get on board this, which is quite cool, right? If they can manage it. There are still problems, there are still hoops to jump through, and we've written about it extensively on Digital DJ Tips. You'll find an article there. However, ultimately, this could be really big news in DJing. It already is, for the reasons I've just given you. It's fun to be able to play using your software away from the club, but then take a USB into the club, and now you can do it without using clunky third-party add-ons and so on. So it's all pretty cool. The big question is, though, is it going to turn into what we talked about at the beginning? Again, one library for everything. Well, let's talk about why it might and why it might not. So let's be positive. Yes, it will. This is definitely a sea change in the small world, and it is a small world, the DJ world. It's not a big world. It's not, in the big scheme of things, it's not a big industry. It's definitely a sea change because the biggest manufacturers said, hey, you know what, let's all work together. So I believe they're sincere, and I believe that that is worth celebrating. I think also, and this is speculation, I promise you it's speculation, I think as the DJ market continues to mature and the software market continues to mature, we might just lose a player or two. We might just get to a situation where one or two people merge or consolidate. You know, it nearly happened with Serato and Pioneer, which would mean Recordbox and Serato would have been owned by the same company. I just think we might get to a point where there are suddenly one or two fewer players at some point, not this week, not this month, not even this year, but at some point over the medium term, I think that might happen. So now we've got even fewer players that need to get in the same ballpark, right? So all of these things point to maybe one day this is going to happen, and maybe one day we will be able to just import our music into any software and suddenly it'll be available in all the other software platforms. And the fact that people are increasingly using the cloud, increasingly using Dropbox to keep their music, for instance, and then expecting to be able to open another laptop and look at it there. You know, this is kind of saying, well, if we're going to be using the cloud and using more than one platform, our phone, our laptop and so on, then why not just have one collection across everything, one true library? So they're the positives. That's the optimistic look on this. But what about the negatives? Well, there is too much what I would call proprietary stuff going on out there. In other words, Algorithms DJ has stuff it does better than other people. Traktor has stuff that they're precious about. Serato has stuff they're precious about. Recordbox has stuff they're precious about. Recordbox has things called memory queues and smart tags. And Serato has its own way of doing things in the background, which hasn't changed for years. Whereas Algorithms DJ is always being updated with things like AI beat grids. And, you know, they've all got their own separate stuff, whether it's historical and therefore hard to change, or whether it's new and no one else has got it. Which means pushing all that lot into one might just prove to be, you know, a meld too far. It'd just be technically too hard. And also, let's just play devil's advocate stroke pessimist here. Just because the biggest companies said, come on, we'll let you export your music to play on our gear, that might not be enough of a sea change, right? It might not be. They're hardly throwing open the doors and say, come on everyone, let's just have a big happy loving. You know, it's not unicorns and rainbows. They've got a real reason for wanting everyone else to be able to work more closely with their gear, because they're very good at making gear and everyone likes their gear. They're not so good at the software side of things. Anyone who's battled with the AlphaTheta Pioneer DJ platform, which is called Recordbox, will know it does some things all right, but other things are frustrating. And they're not very good at handling that user base in a way that keeps everyone happy. They're just not, or they certainly haven't been to date. So they might have thought, you know what, software's hard. Let's let the people who are better at it than us, you know, get closer to our hardware. And then maybe one day we don't need to worry too much about that. So there could be a non-altruistic reason for all of this. Anyway, it is big news. It is big news that you can export your music from Traktor and Algorithms DJ as well as Recordbox now to play on easily the biggest names hardware out there. And also just another little thing. It's really hard to get your music onto Algorithms DJ platform on iPhone and iPad. It's really hard. It's just like one of those things that you go, I love this little platform. It's fun to have DJing in my pocket, but I can't get my music in there. Well, this is a great way of doing it, because you just stick your music from your laptop version of that software onto one of these drives and you stick it into your phone, plug it straight into the charging port. And now you can either just play from there or you can import it. Job done. That's worth celebrating on its own. Just a little Easter egg there. Anyway, OneLibrary from AlphaTheta is big news this week. Dan in the live chat says it sounds cool, but I'm guessing that there's as yet no direct way to export playlists from one platform, e.g. DJ, to another, e.g. Rekordbox, without using a USB stick. Exactly, Dan. And that's what's missing here. You have to use the USB stick. And so that means it isn't really one library at all. It's, as I said at the beginning, one import and export. So we're going to move on to our second topic in today's set of 3 topics, which are burning the pages and the social medias and the YouTube channels of the DJ industry. Let's do that right now. When did headphones and speakers get so damn complicated? That's a question that a few people have been asking recently as we've reported on some of the more advanced new technology that has been released over the last months and couple of years, say, that helps you get more out of your DJ speakers, and I'm talking about your studio speakers and your monitor speakers at home, because actually some of this technology has already existed in clubs for a long time. But we're talking about home use, right? We're talking about home studios, practicing at home in your bedroom, whatever. Speakers seem to have acquired a lot of extra stuff that they didn't have a little while ago. They've got complicated. And when it comes to headphones, the thing that you plug from your headphones into your headphone socket now has other things that you can put between. In other words, there's something you can plug in that does something else before the audio hits your headphones now. There's several things you can plug in, not just headphone amplifiers, and we'll talk about them, but very clever little audio processing units as well. What is all this about? Do you need it? Is it just confusion? Are you missing something if you're just thinking, I don't want any of this? Well, we'll talk about that now. Firstly, let's talk about what has arrived for DJs and producers using speakers and headphones that wasn't there a couple of years ago. So when it comes to speakers, the big thing that's arrived, and actually if you've used things like Sonos speakers at home, you probably already know this because they're starting to build this into home audio as well. But the big thing that's arrived is room correction. Room correction is where your speakers get clever additional digital circuitry that means that with a little bit of input from you, normally waving your phone around using its built-in microphone and an app if you're at home, or waving a speaker calibration microphone around if you're doing it with monitors, waving something around that's plugged into a laptop or the back of the speaker or whatever, in the room that you're going to be listening to the speakers in, will allow the clever circuitry to figure out what's good and bad about your room, where it echoes, what frequencies are muffled, what frequencies are deadened, and what frequencies are too harsh. And it can apply very fine EQ and timing changes to the different frequencies so that it basically sounds better, a lot better. So that's called room correction. And that's been, as I said, it's been around in consumer speakers for a little while. It's come to DJ speakers, to studio monitors in a reasonably big way recently. It's in speakers such as the Adam Audio A range, the A4V and 7V are the two that we've reviewed at Digital DJ Tips, which plug in via an Ethernet cable to some software running on your laptop. IK Multimedia have similar speakers. Some of them you can just plug a microphone directly into the back of it that they provide, and then have that where your head is going to be, if you like, in your practice studio, and it can figure stuff out that way. So that's even simpler to set up. And so this is pretty cool, right? And it's something that I think going to see more of. When it comes to your headphones, well, the headphones that you use for DJing, the only real thing that's changed with DJ headphones is something called Sonic Link, which has been introduced by our old friend AlphaTheta, which is a way of listening to your music without a cord between the headphones and the gear. Now you might say, well, that's been around for a decade or more. It's called Bluetooth. But the trouble with Bluetooth is there's a delay between whatever you do and what you hear, which is obviously no good for DJing. So they've invented something, or rather they've found a system that works for them and slapped a label on it, which they call Sonic Link. And they've launched headphones and DJ gear that can use this in order to give you no wires in the DJ booth, but no delay as well. But that's the only thing I can think of really that's come to DJ headphones that's worth talking about. No, the big thing that's come to headphones is for the studio, really. It's for when you are producing mashups, bootlegs, re-edits, as us DJs like to do, to give ourselves something in the music collections that we're playing from that other people haven't got in this day when everyone can have everything, right? So we're getting into doing that a lot more, aren't we? We've got an amazing course with Laidback Luke that's very popular, teaching you to make mashups and bootlegs and re-edits. Luke actually does it all in headphones. But the thing with making music, and I count that as making music, and of course if you're producing music, well, of course you're making music. The thing with making music in just headphones is that you can't really trust what you're hearing. Let me explain why. If you're sat in, let's imagine you're sat in a posh studio like I've got here, with your speakers behind you and the whole room is deadened, so the sound sounds like a radio studio, you know, it sounds nice. And you are making a track, right? You're making a track and you're listening to it and you're moving around the room. You can hear pretty much what that track sounds like when it's played back on a really good system, because you're in a really good room listening on really good speakers. If you put headphones on, a few things happen. The first thing that happens is that anything coming out of the left-hand speaker only comes into your left ear, and anything coming out of the right-hand speaker only comes into your right ear entirely. So think about this. Imagine you're in a studio with a speaker on your left and a speaker on your right, and you put a sound all the way to the left. Now in a studio, you're still going to hear it in your right ear because it bounces around the room and some of it gets to your right ear, right? You know, just because you've panned it to the left in your DJ in your production software, it doesn't mean it only comes out of your left ear, right? Obviously. In headphones, it does. So think about it. Wouldn't it be good if you could have your headphones almost emulate you being in a room? And wouldn't it be really good if you could pick the speakers and the position of the speakers? You could say, I normally have my speakers here in my room, so I want them here. And wouldn't it be good if you could choose what those speakers were? The speakers I'm used to producing on are this brand or this type, so I want that. Well, you can now get really clever hardware that plugs, and software, by the way, that you can run on your laptop, that plugs between the output that you would normally just listen to on headphones and the headphones, and makes all those things real. It does it using dastardly digital trickery, but it does it, and it is absolutely fantastic. So if you're serious about making music and for whatever reason you need to do it on headphones, you're on a plane, you're in a hotel room, you're doing it late at night in a small apartment where you've got family asleep or whatever, this is really, really good technology. Again, one of the leading brands is IK Multimedia, and there's also Sonarworks, who do some great software that do this. I think they might make hardware as well. So these things are cool, and we've reviewed them on Digital DJ Tips. Head over to Digital DJ Tips. We've reviewed the new IK Multimedia little gadget that does that recently over there. This stuff's out there, and if you follow our channels and if you follow any DJ industry outlets, you will hear about this stuff. The question is, and the question that people ask us, especially DJs who've basically never thought there's anything wrong with the way they currently do it, is, do I need this stuff? When did it get so complicated, and am I missing out? So here is my simple answer, and this is what I've shared with several students recently. If you are DJ practicing, if you're in your studio practicing DJing, actually none of this stuff matters, because all you need is monitors very close to you pointing at your head and a pair of headphones that you can cue the next track up in. And if you're using your headphones alone and you're not using monitors at all, and some DJs like to do that for all the reasons we just talked about, then actually you're using them in a very unnatural way anyway. You will be quickly flicking between sources, or you'll have the master output on one ear and the output you're lining up on the other ear. You will have learned, you will have made adaptations in your style and in the way that you taught yourself the skills that allow you to do that. But part of what you accepted when you did that is, I'm not sat there like a hi-fi buff with my headphones on and my feet up on my expensive footstool, getting lost in the music. No, I'm doing a job here. I'm DJing, right? And I'm accepting that I'm using these tools to do that. You don't need any of these things. You don't need speaker emulation and room emulation and correction and any of that. You just don't. You need it loud and near. That's it. If you are making music, then I think you should think very seriously about if it's going to be done just on headphones, looking at some of the ways that you can make that sound more realistic in your headphones. Again, you can emulate being in a room with speakers where they should be. You can emulate what those speakers are, but also you can correct for the particular type of headphone that you're wearing, because different brands of headphones sound different. And so you can fix that as well. And so whether it's a plug-in for your production software, and you can get plugins for Ableton Live that will do this, for instance, or whether it's a small piece of hardware, the one we reviewed from IK Multimedia recently, just to give you an example, it's tiny, it's got a little battery built in, you can chuck it in your bag and carry it anywhere. If you're thinking of producing music and you're thinking of doing it just on headphones, I think this is a really good new way of making that job easier. Because if you ask any producer, can you produce just on headphones? Most producers will say no, because they know that they can't trust what they're hearing on headphones. And when they hear it loud on speakers, they might get some nasty surprises, right? So producers might get to the point where it's time to mix and master that just using cheap old headphones or whatever, but they will never do the final stuff on headphones. With this, there is definitely a chance that you could, which I think is quite exciting. So you don't need to worry about it, people. This is all great advances in technology. Ultimately, any good amplifier and speakers and headphones will do, certainly for DJing and often just for producing, as long as you're happy to use the speakers. It's only when you are getting into the nitty-gritty of finishing your tracks that this is going to really help you if you're forced, for whatever reason, to use your headphones. It's great tech, though. Really is great tech. So Cabes says in our live chat, which studio monitors have you found were the best overall? I'm looking for something with great bass extension and great hi-fi sound. Look, it's very, very personal what studio monitors you go for. The pair that we've been using in the studio recently for quite a while and we've been very happy with are the Adam Audio A7Vs. They're big. They're good for a medium-sized room. They've got some of that stuff I just talked about, but also you can just set them to straight flat mode where they just take the signal and make it loud and blast it into your face. They're very good for DJing and producing, but it's going to cost you, $1,000 to buy a pair of those. So if you're in a smaller room, you're not going to want something as big as that. So it just depends. It really does. I would recommend that you just chat in the community about that to other students, and you'll be able to then share room sizes and experiences and so on, and chat to us, of course. We're there to help. Brian says, I'm loving the expertise being delivered by Digital DJ Tips. I'd never considered how tracks could sound different between headphones and speakers. I know it's crazy, isn't it? But once you think about it, you can't kind of unlearn it. It's obvious. So that's what we're here for. I'm glad you're finding value in that, Brian. So this is the Digital DJ Tips podcast. It's the Inside Track edition, and we are talking about 3 burning issues in the world of DJing. We've already talked about OneLibrary, and it's not actually OneLibrary, a new very exciting thing launched by AlphaTheta to help DJs swap their music between different DJ software platforms, but it's not quite the OneLibrary we all want. We've talked about that, and we've just talked about advances in headphones and speaker technology to make life easier and more fun for DJs and for producers. It's time to move on to our 3rd and final topic of today. So another big piece of news in the DJ industry over the last couple of weeks. In fact, it was kind of leaked out maybe 6 weeks ago, but no one else really picked up on it. And as I was cleaning my email inbox the other week, I did. And I thought, wow, this is actually quite big news for DJs who use streaming services to DJ from. In order for me to explain why this is big news and to explain what's coming, I need to tell you a little bit about the background here, why DJs use streaming services to play music from, why they shouldn't use them, but why they do. And I'm not giving you a value judgment there. I use them, but I guess what I'm saying is the reasons they use them and the reasons that they avoid them still to this day. Give you a bit of background and then talk about this piece of news. So the background is recently, and I'm talking the last couple of years, streaming services have started to become a big thing in DJ software. Of course, everyone uses them. Everyone uses Spotify and Apple Music and so on, right? Everyone in the world. That's how we consume our music. So a bit funny that DJs don't. Well, they do now. right? It's now in all your DJ software, it's in all your platforms, it's on most hardware, it's just there, it's an option. Should you use it all the time? Hell no, you should own your music. But is it good for discovery? Is it good for the odd request? Is it good for playing parties where you don't have any of the music you want to play, but you want to just quickly start spinning? Of course it is. It's not an either or. It's good to have streaming services, but they're not to replace your music collection, right? That's where we're at the moment. However, look, you can get Spotify in your DJ software now. You can get Apple Music, you can get Tidal, you can get Beatport and Beatsource, you can get SoundCloud. There's others as well. So they're all there and we should be using them. And you should have one anyway because it's the best way to discover new music. So you might as well have one that works in your DJ software. The big news is, and this is what I jumped on, I really did jump on it. I dug deep in it, I asked around, I even spoke to the CEO of the company, right? The big news is that Beatport, which is one of the serious DJ streaming services, right? If you don't know Beatport, it was the original, it was the OG DJ download store. Beatport, along with names like Traxsource and Juno Download, were right there when the iPods and Apple's iTunes store were coming into the scene. They were right there with the very first DJ MP3s and downloads and so on. So these people have been there supplying DJs with electronic music ever since the beginning, and Beatport's easily the biggest of them, right? So decades of experience. Beatport has a streaming service and it is therefore a heavyweight by definition. You can buy music from Beatport, but you can also now stream it into your DJ software. Beatport's very good with electronic music. It's got like 7 techno genres and 3 trance genres, and you know, it's got the subgenres of the subgenres and so on. It covers electronic dance music brilliantly. Beatport a couple of years ago, maybe 5 years ago now, because we all know how quickly time flies as you get older. They teamed up with and merged with, if you like, a service called DJ City. Now, DJ City was a very different proposition, but equally serious about DJs and about providing music to DJs. DJ City is a download pool from West Coast America, and DJ City provides open format and commercial DJs with their music, pop music, hip hop, Latin, and so on. These people are not the same as the electronic crowd, right? They're not. They're different crowds, they're different types of music, different ways of DJing. They don't really cross over that much, or rather they didn't. And what Beatport did was say, you know what, because these two crowds are very separate and so on, we're going to launch a new service for that part of the market. And they called it Beatsource. So they now have Beatport and Beatsource. They're both quite expensive. They're both in your DJ software and hardware. And by quite expensive, I mean like $30 a month or something, right? So it's 3 times the price you pay for basic Spotify. So if you wanted both of those, that's a lot of money, right? So this is the news. This is what I picked up on. There was a press release kind of leaked out saying that Beatport, so remember, this is the electronic music undergroundy one with all the little labels and stuff. Beatport is now going to have pop and dance and hip hop. And by dance, I mean commercial dance and Latin and all those genres that it never covered before, but that Beatsource covers. The genres that the major labels cover. The genres that Apple Music and Spotify and Tidal cover. In other words, Beatport was going to get all the stuff that Beatsource does as well. So now my immediate reaction was, what's going to happen to Beatsource? So I got straight onto the CEO, Rob, from Beatport, and Rob kindly agreed to talk to me. Mainly off the record, I have to say, but he did give me a quote, and his quote was enough. It said, we are looking, and I'm paraphrasing, but you can go and see the article at digitaldjtips.com. We are looking to make one streaming destination for all DJs. So that to me says merger. There's a merger coming of Beatport and Beatsource. Now this is big news because Beatport users will be like, well, we don't want all that stuff on our platform. Beatsource users will be like, what's happening to Beatsource? But if you just step back a second away from those worries, this is probably the biggest news and the best news for users of both of those platforms. Because if you're an electronic DJ who's asked to play a commercial party, suddenly it's all already in your streaming service, everything you need. If you're a underground DJ, then you've got access to the stuff that the other side has. But at the same time, if you're an open format DJ, a pop DJ, commercial DJ, but your first love and the stuff you do for fun is underground dance music, but you've never been able to justify spending 300 or 400 a year on just subscribing to that, well, it's now there. It's now there inside the same service. I think what's happening here is quite clear. We're going to get one service, whether they call it, you know, Beatport open format and Beatport electronic, all under one roof, all under one subscription, all under one sign-in, whatever. This is coming. And I think it's really good news. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why it's good news, but I'll also tell you why we need to be a bit wary. The reason it's good news is that these companies are for DJs. It doesn't matter whether it's the commercial side or the underground side, they are for DJs. These companies, therefore, are DJ focused. They've got DJ record labels, they've got the main labels now, they've got DJ charts and playlists, they've got extended versions, they've got cut down versions, clean versions, easy to mix versions. They've got a deep DJ catalogue between them with all the edits and remixes and mashups and so on. You can buy the music and stream the music all from the same place. This is pretty cool, right? And for one subscription, it looks like soon you'll be able to get the lot. And I think that is definitely worth celebrating. I think the only thing we need to worry about here is it's our old friend Monopoly, right? And I'm not talking about the board game. We don't really want to be relying on one service for everything. We don't really want to be relying on Pioneer DJ stroke AlphaTheta for all our DJ hardware and software. We don't really want to be relying on the Beatport group for all of our music, right? I don't think this is a massive problem. You know, the other stores still exist, and of course we can still use other streaming services and so on. And DJs, I think, are magpies by nature, right? We love the thrill of finding tracks no one else has got and going looking in places no one else looks. So I think, I suspect that DJs won't buy that fully and they will still go looking elsewhere for their music. But I think we're going to get to a point where that streaming service is a bit of a no-brainer for DJs. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens because I do think it's coming, but I do think they're going to handle it carefully so they don't kind of alienate both audiences. So I'd love to know what you think. And in fact, I'm going to spend the last couple of minutes of today's show just going into the live comments. We do record these live and therefore I have live comments. Jack says, with those two combining, it might be worth the price and to get rid of other streaming platforms like Tidal. I think Tidal might be the big loser in this because Tidal is an absolute minnow already against Apple Music and Spotify and so on. Beatport is as well, but Beatport always was and it's always existed alongside other services as a download store. There's no reason why it can't exist alongside them as a streaming platform. So I think Tidal could be the big loser here. Bernadette says, yes, agreed, that would be amazing. James says, I think it's great news. I've tried both, but I couldn't get £30 worth of value out of either. But one service together is great. Roman says, I'm using streaming in my gigs. I play often requests at garden parties and house parties and so on. And I use Algorithms DJ Pro. Yes, it's very good for that. And I find its search is really good. It is Algorithms DJ Pro, as we mentioned right at the beginning of today's show, is a very good piece of software. And I think, you know, I just said Tidal as a streaming service might be the big loser when it comes to the changes in that world. And to kind of link back to the very top of today's show, I think Algorithms DJ Pro might be the big winner of this kind of new OneLibrary initiative. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, go listen to this show again from the start, and we talked about it at the beginning. Brian in the live chat says, I must be honest, I would not be confident using streaming service at present. I definitely agree with owning your music. So these services are getting a lot better. Another thing I haven't mentioned about Beatport and Beatsource, which will hopefully almost definitely be one service again very soon, or one service very soon, is that in some platforms, they already give you what they call an offline locker. So you can download your whole playlist of stuff you might want to play ahead of time, which of course solves any worry about the internet. But also they will generally load the whole track into your DJ software before you are allowed to play it, or at least even if you're allowed to play it before it's downloaded, it will continue to download it in the background. So within seconds of choosing and loading a track, the whole track's there. And if the internet does wobble, it won't be the end of the world. You won't go into some situation where it's dead air. And so, yes, it's never going to be as reliable, if you like. But then again, people always said MP3s weren't as reliable as playing a record or a CD. And no one's worrying about that now, are they? Ultimately, I think fast internet, stable internet is just going to be like light and, you know, electricity and so on. You expect decent lighting, and you expect the power to stay on when you're DJing, and if it doesn't, well, it's not your fault. I think the internet will probably end up being exactly the same thing in DJ booths as streaming becomes more and more accepted, and as our lives move more and more into the cloud. And that's where we're going to leave it. Thank you to our students for making it the usual vibrant, dynamic podcast today and helping me through with your feedback on all of those topics. If you've enjoyed this, please give us a 5-star review on your platform. It really helps to spread the word, and maybe say some kind words. But if you're interested in learning more about our community and about learning to DJ with us, then head over to digitaldjtips.com, where you'll also find articles, videos and guides around all the topics we've spoken about today. Meanwhile, from me, Phil Morse, here in the studio, until next time, get good, get out there and make the moments. Bye for now.